Ever wonder how a man who lies, cheats, and can barely form a sentence still pulls half of West Hollywood? Let's talk about the Jax Taylor phenomenon. There's a peculiar magic trick at the center of Vanderpump Rules: Jax Taylor's inexplicable ability to attract women. Watching his single boy era on Season 3 feels less like witnessing flirtation and more like enduring a badly written audition tape for a cologne commercial, corny, predictable, and drenched in self-regard. His attempts at charm have all the finesse of a motivational speaker at a dive bar, yet women continue to fall at his feet. How? The prevailing defense of Jax's appeal is his looks, though that argument withers quickly under scrutiny. Perhaps in the early seasons, before the steroidal bloat set in and his torso took on the tragic, shellacked quality of a gym supplement ad, there was something conventionally attractive about him. But even then, the eyes, those flat, unblinking shark eyes, betrayed the vacancy beneath the surface. Jax's secret, such as it is, lies not in depth or charisma, but in pure manipulative instinct. As Tom Schwartz once pointed out, Jax tells women exactly what they want to hear. Not because he believes it, but because he's rehearsed it. It's emotional ventriloquism. Just enough faux vulnerability. I've never told anyone this before. To simulate intimacy. Just enough persistence to confuse infatuation with attention. Intelligence isn't required, just shameless repetition and a working knowledge of female insecurity. This is the essence of Jax. Not a master seducer, but a compulsive salesman. Every line is a pitch, every smile a closing tactic. It's why his words eventually ring hollow, much like Mauricio Umansky's robotic, "You look amazing," tossed at Kyle Richards without looking up from his phone. Compliments lose their power when they sound like scripts. There's also the unspoken truth of the environment. Add alcohol, a touch of cocaine, and the delusion of safety that comes from being surrounded by cameras, and suddenly, even the cheesiest nightclub monologue can masquerade as chemistry. It's not romance. It's a carefully engineered illusion. And then there's fame, the final accelerant. By the time Brittany Cartwright appeared, Jax wasn't just a man in a bar. He was a man on TV. Brittany didn't stumble into his orbit by fate. She and a friend flew to Las Vegas, knowing exactly where he and the cast would be. She dumped her Kentucky boyfriend the moment opportunity, and the Bravo camera crew knocked. Seeking him out wasn't metaphorical, it was strategic. In the end, Jax Taylor's game is less about seduction and more about saturation. Enough charm to distract, enough exposure to attract, and enough practice to perfect the illusion. Narcissism, addiction, and performance art in equal measure. And yes, there will always be women drawn to the corniness, the same way some people can't resist infomercials promising abs in 30 days. Because for all his mediocrity, Jax embodies a potent fantasy, the good-looking disaster who notices you. It's never love. It's marketing. And no one sells the illusion of himself quite like a man who believes his own lies. Nothing says romance like begging your friends to finance your marriage. Brock's Guide to Love, Leeching, and Luxury. Revisiting Vanderpump Rules. Season 9 offers a masterclass in delusion, entitlement, and poorly disguised opportunism, chiefly starring Brock, the show's perennial freeloader with a dream. In a plotline that could have been ripped from a parody of itself, Brock apparently believed Randall and Lala should not only fund his surprise wedding, but also plan it within 48 hours. The audacity was Olympic level. The self-awareness, non-existent. Brock's behavior is almost performance art in parasitism. He attaches himself to Scheana like a publicity barnacle, leveraging her fame, marrying her for a green card, and promptly eroding whatever goodwill remained by cheating after the ceremony. On a show already saturated with inflated egos and moral bankruptcy, Brock still manages to outdo the competition with his brazen sense of entitlement. Yet, amid the outrage, it's worth untangling the myth from the melodrama. Contrary to Lala's breathless retelling, there's no evidence that Randall or anyone else ever offered to swipe a credit card for Brock's ill-conceived nuptials. In fact, once estimates surfaced and reality reared its unglamorous head, Brock declined within a day, an act of restraint rare enough to merit documentation. Randall's supposed involvement was little more than a mirage conjured for storyline fodder, not unlike the infamous animatronic hand spectacle Beau once considered for a proposal, before realizing it would cost roughly $30,000. The recurring theme is depressingly familiar, men circling Randall as if he were a benevolent financier instead of a Hollywood-grade scam artist. Brock's wedding debacle simply exposes how low the collective bar has fallen. Scheana's desperation to couple up produced exactly what desperation always does: a partnership built on fumes, fantasy, and a green card application. In the end, Brock didn't just try to outsource his wedding, he outsourced dignity itself. And as always in the Vanderpump universe, there was no shortage of enablers ready to film it. They called it our 9/11, and no, that's not a joke someone should have made, but it tells you everything about how unhinged the Scandoval era really was. Every generation has its defining moment. Some remember where they were when a president was shot, a war began, or a wall fell. Others, apparently, remember where they were when Tom Sandoval's affair was exposed. The Scandoval saga, a sordid blend of narcissism, deceit, and Bravo-fueled melodrama, didn't just shatter a relationship. It united an unlikely congregation of bathtub scrollers, treadmill sleuths, and the unemployed faithful in collective hysteria. The confessions are almost anthropological. Some were soaking in bathwater when the world imploded, risking their phones for the sake of breaking news. Others were mid-workday professionals who abandoned productivity entirely, explaining the Ariana situation to baffled spouses. There were road trippers desperately refreshing Twitter in the deserts of Utah, gym-goers achieving personal bests fueled by outrage, and the jet-setters in France who suddenly found their jewelry politically incorrect. Ah yes, the jewelry. The lightning bolt necklace, once a harmless trinket, now a scarlet letter of poor taste, became an instant symbol of infamy. Sandoval's penchant for the motif, immortalized through Raquel's matching charm, turned gold-plated accessories into emblems of betrayal. One poor soul now owns a real gold lightning bolt she'll never wear again, cursed by association. Suggestions to pawn it off to a Chargers fan were both practical and poetic, an effort to extract some material gain from emotional wreckage. As the scandal spread, fans reacted not with measured curiosity, but with the zeal of investigative journalists and cult devotees. People were taking notes, literal notes, on podcasts, composing reports for cousins, and monitoring updates as though Bravo had replaced the Associated Press. The unemployed called it their full-time job. The working population, meanwhile, stopped pretending to work. And somewhere between the elliptical and the endless Reddit refreshes, someone declared it our 9/11. Because nothing says cultural self-awareness like equating a Bravo affair with a national tragedy. The correction came swiftly, but the sentiment, an absurd blend of hyperbole and sincerity, summed up Scandoval's strange cultural gravity. It wasn't just gossip, it was spectacle. What made it so consuming wasn't the cheating itself. Men like Sandoval are not exactly rare in nature, but the audacity of it, the performative sincerity, the matching necklaces, the delusion of secrecy in an age of total surveillance. It was reality TV's Ouroboros moment, a scandal about a show built on scandal, devouring itself in real time. For many, the weekend it broke was a blur of binge-watching and disbelief. Some revisited entire seasons just to reconstruct the timeline of deceit, piecing together clues like amateur detectives in sequins. Others were forced to socialize with people who didn't care, enduring dinner parties where no one grasped the magnitude of the crisis. And so the world kept turning. But for a brief, shining, utterly ridiculous moment, a nation of viewers was united in purpose. Phones were clutched, hearts were broken, and lightning bolts were forever tarnished. Scandoval wasn't just a cheating scandal. It was the collective unraveling of delusion. Proof that reality TV might not reflect real life, but it certainly dictates its accessories. What if I told you Jax Taylor's Florida hockey job never existed, and that he might have invented it mid-bender? Every so often, a Vanderpump Rules storyline emerges so absurd, it transcends reality television and enters the realm of performance art. Jax Taylor's alleged social media job offer with a Florida hockey team, reportedly the Tampa Bay Lightning, belongs squarely in that category. The story, repeated with the straight-faced confidence only Jax could muster, always sounded less like a legitimate career opportunity and more like the byproduct of a late-night, chemically enhanced conversation with a buddy who once knew someone in the industry. It had that distinctly Jaxian quality, a faint whiff of truth buried beneath several layers of self-aggrandizing fantasy. Perhaps there was a friend, perhaps hockey was mentioned. But imagining that this morphed into a serious job offer, especially one that would have Jax packing his collection of affliction teas and heading south to manage NHL social media, is pure comedy. The Tampa Bay Lightning's actual communications department likely took one look at his resume, if one was ever sent, and consigned it to the recycling bin before lunch. Professional sports social media roles are not the playgrounds of self-proclaimed influencers and reality TV bartenders. They're filled by people with marketing degrees, experience with analytics platforms, and a grasp of spelling. Managing an NHL team's online presence isn't about posting final scores with the right filter. It's a full-fledged business operation requiring strategic campaigns, monetization, audience segmentation, and measurable KPIs. One imagines Jax hearing KPI and assuming it's a new vodka brand. The notion that an NHL franchise, one with multi-million-dollar sponsors and a massive fan base, would entrust its digital identity to a man whose professional highlight reel includes drinking at Sur and lying on camera is laughable. Even unpaid interns in that world come armed with degrees, experience, and a deep understanding of the sport. In truth, the Florida hockey job was never an offer. It was an illusion, a blend of jealousy, bravado, and delusion. Around the time his castmates were opening TomTom, Jax needed his own storyline of relevance. So he created one, a concoction of his favorite subjects: hockey, Florida, social media, and himself. The result was quintessential Jax Taylor theater, a fictional opportunity, told with enough conviction to almost sound plausible, if only you'd never met the man or watched him attempt a full sentence without error. The Tampa Bay Lightning may have a roster full of champions, but Jax's imaginary stint with them remains his greatest fantasy league achievement. Never confuse friendship with free therapy. Stassi learned that the hard way with Kristen Doute. There's only so much emotional labor one can perform before the human spirit gives out. And by Vanderpump Rules Season 8, Stassi Schroeder had reached her limit. The volcanic irritation directed at Kristen Doute wasn't born overnight. It was the result of years of unpaid emotional therapy sessions disguised as friendship. Kristen's relationship with Carter had evolved into a one-woman pity production that refused to close. Every episode, every brunch, every girls' night was a rerun. Kristen crying about her miserable boyfriend, declaring it's really over this time, then promptly inviting him back into her bed before the mascara had dried. Her friends weren't just watching a toxic relationship, they were starring in its supporting cast, forced to nod sympathetically through each melodramatic encore. What pushed Stassi and Katie over the edge wasn't simply the endless Carter saga. It was Kristen's insistence on outsourcing her emotional management to them. She explicitly asked her friends to hold her accountable and help her escape her relationship, only to explode the moment they tried. The result? A dizzying cycle of confessions, denials, and accusations in which Kristen managed to be both the victim and the saboteur of her own rescue mission. To make matters worse, there was the off-camera manipulation. Kristen allegedly begged Stassi and Katie to keep her relationship drama alive on screen, because, as any seasoned Bravo-celebrity knows, a storyline means survival. Yet once the cameras rolled, she turned on them, painting her supposed support system as judgmental harpies meddling in her private life. It was a masterclass in hypocrisy, one that made her friends look cruel and herself conveniently pitiable. By the time Season 8 aired, Stassi's patience had collapsed under the weight of 3 years of the same recycled sob story. Kristen's self-inflicted misery had become her brand, her identity, and, most cynically, her job security. Crying over Carter wasn't just emotional chaos, it was content. And while Stassi and Katie were left looking like bad friends, Kristen was quietly reaping the rewards of being the show's perpetual victim. In the end, the rage wasn't irrational. It was the logical endpoint of compassion fatigue. Stassi had seen this movie before, first with Jax, now with Kristen, and she wasn't signing up for another sequel. The only truly surprising thing about the implosion was that it took this long for Stassi to stop playing therapist and start playing human. Here's what they don't tell you about Tom Sandoval's so-called redemption arc. It's not redemption at all. It's narcissism and camouflage. Few reality television figures have managed to turn self-importance into a full-blown art form quite like Tom Sandoval. Watching him on Special Forces, World's Toughest Test, is less a redemption arc than an extended exercise in public self-flagellation, though, naturally, even his attempts at punishment come with a side of narcissistic self-pity. At one point, Sandoval solemnly confesses to his fellow contestants that he cheated on his long-term girlfriend, only to be met with the kind of nonchalance that makes one wonder if anyone else in the room has ever read a tabloid. When asked why his infidelity was such a big deal, he offers a bewildered, "I don't know," a response that neatly encapsulates the moral vacancy that made the entire scandal so grotesque. Evidently, cheating on one's partner of nearly a decade with her best friend, inside the home they share, while she attends her grandmother's funeral, doesn't strike him as uniquely vile. The man truly does not know. And this is precisely why Ariana Madix has never bothered to engage with him. There's no conversation to be had with someone incapable of genuine accountability. Sandoval doesn't lack remorse. He lacks comprehension. The whole spectacle is a study in arrested emotional development, a grown man publicly processing his downfall as if the world should applaud him for it. He describes his appearance on Special Forces as a way to punish himself, yet spends half the time complaining about the public backlash. It's self-atonement with an audience, as only a true narcissist could imagine it. This is not a man haunted by guilt. This is a man haunted by his own reflection. Even outside the survivalist desert, Sandoval's delusion continues to shine, particularly during the roast of Jax Taylor, a masterclass in how to mistake effort for charisma. While his peers deliver sharp, biting jabs, Sandoval's jokes land with the comedic weight of wet cardboard. He's the only one laughing, loudly, desperately, at his own material, as the rest of the room sits in polite horror. It's theater of the cringe, and he is its undisputed star. The contrast is especially brutal when Stassi Schroeder takes the mic and proceeds to eviscerate him with ease, her wit landing cleanly where his performative humor goes to die. Ariana Madix's contribution, subtle, clever, laced with her trademark composure, cuts deeper than any of Sandoval's overwrought attempts at being the entertainer. She embodies cool intelligence. He embodies someone trying very hard to look like he has it. In every creative endeavor, be it music, stand-up, or self-reinvention, Tom Sandoval remains tragically consistent, over-rehearsed, emotionally hollow, and utterly humorless. He is the living embodiment of someone who mistakes theatrical effort for authenticity. And for all his talk of punishment, the real suffering is ours, having to watch him perform contrition like it's another gig at Tom Tom. If you ever wondered what unfulfilled ambition looks like, watch Scheana Shay smile through Stassi's hosting gig. There's something unintentionally tragic about watching Scheana Shay's lifelong ambition crumble in real time, especially when it's being trampled by the heels of her more camera-friendly colleagues. The irony practically writes itself. Scheana, who once declared Andy Cohen had her dream job and proudly cited a journalism background, now has to sit through Stassi Schroeder, of all people, hosting the Vanderpump Villa reunion. Somewhere in that echo of Stassi's smug confidence, one can almost hear Scheana's donkey cackle breaking into a nervous laugh. Let's start with the obvious. Scheana's voice was never going to be her ticket to broadcast glory. It's a nasal assault on the senses. Half bubblegum, half malfunctioning smoke alarm. Add the witchy, ha ha laugh for punctuation. And you've got a sound so distinct it could double as a sleep deterrent. Her podcast, while an impressive feat of self-promotion, is an endurance test that proves not every reality star with a microphone should use it. When Scheana did manage to snag a hosting gig, it was a mixed result at best. She handled herself decently, but the inauthenticity was glaring. The questions clearly fed to her by production, the pacing rushed, the cast barely getting a word in before the next topic was bulldozed through. The fault lies more with editing than effort, but it still underscored the difference between hosting and simply being present with cue cards. Meanwhile, the rest of the Vanderpump alumni seem to have found their post-reality niches. Stassi is thriving in the smugly curated influencer lane. Ariana, after co-hosting the Love Island reunion and returning for Love Island Games, is inching closer to the career Scheana once fantasized about. Even Katie has managed to stay relevant through brand deals and business ventures. Kristen, too, has quietly pivoted into domestic bliss, engaged, maternal, and surprisingly likable on the Valley. In contrast, Scheana seems perpetually caught in a loop of almosts. Almost famous, almost respected, almost the next big thing. Watching others step into roles she publicly claimed as her destiny must sting, a cosmic reminder that likability, tone, and timing often matter more than ambition. If anything, Stassi's reunion hosting gig didn't just entertain the audience, it inadvertently reopened Scheana's oldest professional wound. And when Ariana snagged that Love Island co-hosting spot with Andy Cohen himself, one can only imagine Scheana watching from her podcast mic, smiling through gritted teeth and pretending not to care. In the hierarchy of Vanderpump Rules alumni reinvention, Scheana remains the eternal understudy, forever rehearsing for a spotlight that refuses to turn her way. Everyone remembers Jax as the villain of Season 1, but what if the real betrayal came from Katie and Kristen? Season 1 of Vanderpump Rules is a masterclass in misplaced loyalty and group delusion. The so-called witches of WeHo, Katie and Kristen, spend the early days of the series less like Stassi's ride-or-die friends and more like her reality TV adversaries in training. It's an almost surreal viewing experience. Stassi, barely out of her early 20s, watches her closest friends side with her cheating boyfriend, Jax, and even accuse her of being the unfaithful one. Sympathy for Stassi in those early episodes isn't optional, it's automatic. Frankly, everyone was right about Frank. He was awful. But that doesn't absolve Katie and Kristen's behavior. Watching them publicly dismiss Stassi's claims, escalate a brawl on her birthday, and then act scandalized when Stassi retaliates is exhausting. The entire birthday fiasco is especially grating. Tom Schwartz verbally attacks Stassi with a barrage of insults. Stassi instinctively throws a drink that barely grazes anyone, and yet somehow Katie ends up furious at Stassi. Never mind that Katie only became collateral damage because she physically inserted herself between Stassi and Schwartz. The actual instigator, her boyfriend, conveniently escapes her wrath. The irony runs deep. Katie and Kristen's moral outrage wasn't rooted in loyalty, but in insecurity. When Stassi broke up with Jax, and crucially, stayed broken up, she committed an act of defiance neither of them could match. Both were entangled with serial cheaters, and rather than confront that, they turned on the friend who dared to demand better. Stassi's boundaries exposed their lack of them, and resentment disguised as judgment took over. There's also the undeniable influence of production. Early reports confirm that Stassi and Jax had already split before filming began, but producers wanted a central couple to drive the narrative, so the two were nudged into pretending reconciliation. Katie and Kristen, inexperienced and eager for screen time, played along. Whether it was producer manipulation, Lisa Vanderpump's subtle guidance, or a naive belief that protecting the friend group meant protecting Jax, they became unwitting accessories to their friend's humiliation. In hindsight, their behavior feels less like malice and more like immaturity wrapped in ambition. They were young, desperate to please Oz, and easily steered by the machinations of early reality TV production. Still, it doesn't make the betrayal any less uncomfortable to watch. Season 1 remains a painful snapshot of the trio before self-awareness and therapy entered the chat. a time when loyalty meant denial, and friendship meant maintaining the illusion that everything was fine, as long as the cameras kept rolling.